I may have to switch to my laptop at some point, but all right, it should be fine now.
Okay.
So I wasn't talking shit about the Stonewall per se. I've actually played the Stonewall. I was talking shit about you playing the Stonewall. So
that is my identity. That is my chess career. How dare you?
I had a feeling that might.
Where's Levy? I'm hanging up. Where's Levy?
The savior. Well, here's the let me explain a little bit of my rationale.
Okay.
And so first of all, maybe I can interrogate you a little bit about your sort of chess upbringing. So how long have you been playing? And when did you learn this sort? So how can you give me a little bit of a sense of how you've progressed thus far?
Not well. I started playing chess this summer because of PogChamps, or the end of the summer. And I learned the Stonewall because Levy taught it to me, and it was the only thing I seem to remember. And then we've gone from there. And apparently Levy taught me the Stonewall wrong, and I didn't realize until I rewatched his video on YouTube where he retaught it differently. So I've been kind of doing it differently. So we call it the cutie wall. It's pretty good.
Interesting. Okay. And what's your rating currently?
872.
Okay. So you've been playing Brox just since the summer. Perfect. So do you feel that, like, at this point in your chess development, is there sort of a specific area that you've been struggling in, or do you feel like there's something you want immediate instruction on, or is it sort of an overall assessment that you're looking for?
Overall, but also I'm really bad with black pieces.
Okay.
Like, really, really bad. And it makes me very angry. And I'm bad at, like, discovered checks.
Okay. Discovered checks.
Yeah, I just, like, don't see them. And I don't use them correctly.
Interesting. Okay, so discovered checks, black pieces, openings of the black pieces.
Yeah.
Particularly against e4. What do you play against e4 right now?
I just do the Stonewall.
Okay, so can we make an analysis board? Can I invite you to it? Yeah. Because as far as I remember, there's no Stonewall against one e4. I mean, you could play the Stonewall, but you might get checkmated in a couple of moves.
I'll usually do it incorrectly, and I'll just start making a Stonewall.
Okay, we will solve this problem ASAP. I am a mercenary that... Okay, let me make an analysis board, and then I'll invite you to it. At some point, my headphones will run out of battery, and I will connect new ones, so I will stop hearing you at some point in the next, like, 15 minutes for, like, 30 seconds. I want to get what your chat thinks of... Are you just QTCinderella in the...
I need to go to live.
Okay, yeah, just go to live chess. I think there's an inverse correlation, as you've already figured out, between competence in every stage and field of life and chess. And it's a strict inverse correlation. All right.
What did you just say?
No, there's an inverse relationship between how good you are at chess and how good you are at everything else. So when your chess gets better, everything suffers.
That's my brain did not comprehend that. I was like, I'm not processing. Okay. So since I'm so good at life, that's why I'm bad at chess.
Right, exactly. Well, you're not bad at chess. I think you're better than maybe you think, but we'll see.
Okay, my goal is to be better than Ludwig, which I know Hess does lessons with him, and Hess is in my chat.
Oh, he's in my chat too. He's infested both of our chats.
Oh my god, Hess, teach him bad moves so I can beat him someday.
Little do you know of the state of my relationship with the GM Hess. We're mortal enemies. Okay, so let me know when you're in live chess. Okay,
I'm there.
And you're QTCinderella?
Yep.
Okay, I just invited you. See if you got it. Anything capitalized? QT capital and C capital?
Q, yeah, the first three letters all capital.
First three letter. Okay, let me try that. All right, just invited you.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Perfect.
Yay.
Okay, so e4, what would you play right now if your next opponent played e4?
Okay. I guess what I've been doing recently is copying. Well, yeah. Well, yeah, and then I'll usually build a Stonewall.
Okay, so let's say I go knight f3.
On the wrong side. Levy did tell me that against e4 I should never try to do Stonewall, but I have been doing it anyway.
Okay, so you've been playing c5?
No, I would go d6.
Aha, so that's called the Philidor defense. That is a legitimate opening, but it's not particularly good. And the best line here for white is to play d4, strike in the center immediately.
Yeah, and then I get stressed out.
Right, I mean, white is already attacking the pawn on e5, so you kind of have to take. And you can see that white's got more of the center than you do, so we'll get into like the reasons why that is bad. So we definitely, I think, should start. Would you like for me to teach you a legitimate opening with black so that we can kind of solve this problem?
I would love a legitimate opening with black. I would love it.
So let me give you two different schools of approach. And by the way, I think you can flip. My chat's telling me you can flip the board since we're going to be looking for black. The first is the sort of very conservative approach where I can teach you something relatively easy to learn, and this will get you started. And the main move that beginners play is e4, e5. And that's sort of the standard move. You're copying white as the king's pawn game. And after knight f3, the most popular move by far, the best move by far, is to play knight out to c6. And on a fundamental level, why is this move made? Because the move knight f3, what does this accomplish from white's perspective?
To take that pawn.
To take that pawn, you are defending the pawn to the knight and simultaneously developing your pieces. The object of the opening on a basic level is to develop your pieces actively toward the center. And are you sort of familiar with those basic opening principles?
Yes. That you should control the middle as much as possible. Right?
Okay, yes, that is...
And not touch the same pieces as much as you can.
Right.
And the castle as soon as possible.
Exactly. And I can teach you an opening called the Sicilian defense, which is the move c5. But what I'm inclined to show you is, well, should I teach QT? I'm asking my chat if I should teach you the Stafford Gambit. What do you guys think? That'll be a complete experiment, but it might also win you a lot of games. Yes.
I do love gambits.
Okay.
I seem to thrive off of gambits.
So the gambit that I'm going to show you, and I did not... Absolutely.
I have such attention span problems that I literally have to write this down.
I'm holding a pen in my hand, so
yay!
We are in the same boat here.
Then I started drawing a flower. I shouldn't have done that. Okay, I'm done with my flower.
So this opening is a gambit. It is going to teach you a lot about opening principles, and in order to play this opening well, you are going to have to basically show command of fundamental opening principles, and there's going to be some stuff that you have to remember, but a lot of it is fun. You can win a lot of games very, very fast, and just in general, I think this is going to contribute to your chess development.
Love that. Okay.
Okay, so after knight f3, you play the move knight to f6. This, in and of itself, is called the Russian game, or the Petrov. And being Russian, that completely does not influence my choice. Now, knight c6 is most common. The move that you will be playing is knight to f6.
Okay.
Now, why does this seem odd? What can white do in this position?
Because then you just trade pawns with your knights.
Right. And speaking of discovered checks, here's an early exercise in finding discovered checks. So if you take this pawn on e4, white can deploy the queen to e2, right? And he attacks your knight. What happens if you just drop the knight back to f6? Can you find white's best move here?
Isn't it? Is it f7? Because then he makes the king move.
So, first of all, let's break this down.
I'd be in check.
Right. I mean, as white, you're playing white here, and I'm showing you this opening for black. But just for a second, I want you to find white's best move.
Okay.
And do you notice this? My arrow that I'm drawing, what am I referring to here? The queen and the king. How do you define that? What is that?
I don't know what it's supposed to be called, but I call that like a row.
Yeah.
Like they're on the same row.
I would call that an X-ray. So when a piece stares at the king through another piece. So you have two white pieces and a black piece. You have a black king, a white queen, and then there's a white knight in between the queen and the king on the same file. Does that construction make sense?
Yes.
So that is the precursor to a discovered check. A discovered check is when you move that middle piece out of the way, and then the queen is going to be checking the king, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's think logically where you want to move this knight. When you move this knight, you can move it back to f3 for all you care, and that's check. Is this a particularly effective check? What can black do here to cover this check?
He can move his bishop or his queen.
And which one would you move?
My queen or the bishop.
Absolutely. Why? That's correct.
Because then if he takes it, I still have a queen.
Right. If white takes the bishop, then you have a free queen. But also in the name of developing as fast as possible. You see this queen on e2. It's very poorly placed. Can you tell me why? From the perspective of developing pieces, which piece is it blocking?
It's bishop.
Exactly. And if your king gets stuck in the center, and I want you to like hammer this into your brain. This is a fundamental opening principle. If your king gets stuck in the center of the board, it's going to get in trouble. You want to castle more often than not as quickly as possible. And this bishop not being developed is preventing white from castling. Anyways, so in this position, you want to move the knight and deliver check to black's king. But if you're moving the knight, then you might as well move it to a square where it is attacking an enemy piece. Because black is going to have to attend to the check, and then that knight is going to be able to capture whatever piece it threatens. So where would you move the knight? Now that you've sort of understood the logic behind the discovered check, where would you move the knight? You want to inflict maximum damage to black's most valuable piece. Take your time.
Okay, let me map this out.
Zero rush. And that's a good idea. Noticing all of the squares. Knight in the center controls 8 squares. That's, by the way, why you want to put pieces in the center. They control most amount of squares.
Is it just this one?
Very close. That's the second bet. That's a B+ move. And then I have to cover the check, and what do you do with the knight?
I take the rook.
Excellent. But you can actually win the queen. You have the exactly the right logic, but where can you put the knight to it? Bingo.
The opposite side.
Bingo.
Yeah, I saw the other knight, and I was like, that'll take it, and I totally forgot.
Exactly. And if there wasn't a queen to attack, then you would attack the rook. So discovered checks give you like a credit card with an unlimited roof. You can just spend whatever you want to do because the queen is checking the black king. That's the check that I have to take care of, and now you take the queen. Of course, if I cover with my queen, then what happens?
I take the queen anyway.
You take the queen anyway. Now, could you answer this final question before we move on? Could you play knight takes f7 and also take a pawn and then take the queen? Or would that not work?
That wouldn't work because the king would take the knight.
The king would take the knight. That's what you have to be careful of. When you're giving a discover check, you want to make sure that the piece, the king that's being checked, isn't also taking the piece that's doing the discovering. Does that make sense?
Repeat.
So when you are giving a discover check, there is a piece that's sort of doing the discovering, and I would say that that's the knight.
That's the knight.
And then there's the piece.
He is our Sacagawea.
Yes, he's a Sacagawea, and the queen is Lewis or Clark, well, if you please. And you want to make sure that the king cannot capture Sacagawea and escape Lewis and Clark, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And however you want to, visualize the queen and the knight. When you move the knight, it's a standalone unit. So the king, if you take on d7, for example, can capture the knight. Or if you take on f7, it can also capture the knight. That's the one thing you want to avoid with discovered checks.
Lame. Yeah, okay.
So that makes sense, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll practice discovered checks a lot more, and I'll show you how to practice them on your own. But for the time being, let's focus on the opening. Now, your opponents are usually going to make one of two moves in this position.
So I'm black again?
You're black. Now flip the board. Okay. Now we're talking about the opening theory. So
I'm ready.
Some of your opponents are going to move the other knight out to c3. This defends the pawn on e4. And in the event of that, you are also going to develop your knight. This is called, believe it or not, chess players are very original. Drum roll, please. The 4 knights game.
Oh, yeah.
You would never believe why that is, right?
Yeah.
Geniuses.
I see. Yeah. Very creative.
And let's very briefly review.
Lots of ladies, those chess
players.
Oh,
yeah. No, I mean, their naming itself already makes them.
Yeah.
Their Tinder profiles get just, you will not believe the number of matches. Yeah. Totally. So essentially, your task, and I want to talk through basically the way that you want to develop your pieces. So let's say that I, as white, play bishop c4. Now you want to develop your bishop on f8. Where do you want to develop it?
c5.
Exactly. And it aims toward f2. I'm going to play d3. Continue with black.
Castle.
Castle is not a bad move, but it is more flexible, and I'll explain to you why in a second, to play the move d6. It's a little bit more tricky to copy white.
This looks like a stonewall, almost.
Well, you've got the, like, pawn chain here, so yeah. I can see some elements of it.
I almost have my cup. Yeah, I see.
So you're close enough to your comfort zone where this isn't too repulsive yet.
Bad. It's bad because then I'll get confused. I'll be like, wait a second, this is off.
If I do a good job, then I'll teach it to you in such a way that you'll understand the principles behind these moves, and so you'll be able to find them. Now, basically,
that's fabulous.
Here's the thing. Let's say that white castles. Now, instead of castling, you have an even better move. This move sets up a pin. What move am I talking about?
Queen.
And where should you move, and which piece should you move?
My queen should move up to d7.
Okay, and how is that a pin?
Fuck, it's not.
Not only is it not a pin, but here's what you're doing. This
Yeah.
this bishop right here, it's seriously complaining because it can't get out. Is that a good thing?
I thought
that is a fucking terrible thing. That's right. Bishop g4 is the move. Now, does this pin... And the concept of a pin you're fully comfortable with, right?
Yes.
Okay, so the bishop is...
But then they always just do this.
Excellent. So you have a choice here. They attack your bishop. And you can either take the knight, or you can drop the bishop back to h5. Intuitively, which of these two moves does your gut tell you to play?
That I should drop back.
Exactly. And if you had to explain why would you drop back and not take the knight?
Honestly, the biggest reason is because Levy said I have to stop playing like a crazy person.
Okay, so let's start with a fact. Pins are good. Okay? Now, pins are good because they essentially make a piece that is pinned unable to move. The knight cannot move. Why?
Because then I'll get the queen for free.
Then you'll get the queen for free. Now, is it always the case that a pinned piece can't move? No, because maybe you could imagine that the knight could move and threaten checkmate. But that situation is very, very rare. And I could show you a situation where a pinned piece actually can move, but that's not important right now. Okay. Pins are good 95% of the time. And so by taking on f3, you are helping white get rid of the pin. You're giving up that very same bishop, which was pinning the knight. So what is white going to take back with?
The queen.
But let's say that you had taken on f3. Can you spot a good move that attacks this queen and activates one of your pieces?
The knight. My knight on the c file.
Very good. Where could it go?
d4.
Exactly. So even if you take on f3, your position isn't terrible. But you could make this move knight d4 to activate your knight. But yes, you should drop the bishop back to preserve the pin.
Okay.
So white has two ways of dealing with this situation. He can either try to chase your bishop away even further with g4.
Yeah.
And here I'm going to teach you a pretty cool response. I don't know if you've ever ran across this.
I've had that happen. Yeah.
Okay, you're going to fuck people up in this line in just a second.
Okay.
You're just bursting with excitement.
We love ruining lives.
Oh, absolutely. And the second thing that white can do is like some sort of neutral move.
We were watching your...
You were watching my what?
We've been watching your like road to 3,000, and it was so sad because you were like playing at 800 and you had 30 seconds left, and you were like, "Chat, relax, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna beat him anyway." And I was like, "That's so sad. That poor 800 is probably like, there's a chance. He's gonna run out of time."
Especially because I've been so slow the entire game, and then all of a sudden.
Yeah, so sad. I would cry. Anyway, yes.
I'm a heartless bastard. You're being taught by a heartless bastard, so full disclosure.
Good. I thrive off this energy. Okay.
Excellent. So the second idea that white can play is just a move like bishop d2. Now, you have this pin, right? Do you know how to exploit this pin? How do you layer on the pressure on this f3 knight? You have a particular move. You just found this move in a different context.
I was going to say the knight again.
Okay. What is your idea? Let's make a random move for white. How are you going to continue now?
I'm going to take that knight.
With what?
With my other knight.
Exactly. Why not with the bishop?
Because my bishop is what's staring at that queen.
Exactly.
And so it'll get taken by that pawn, and then I take it.
Well,
wait a second. No, that doesn't work.
Well, what you want to do here, so you can...
Because then he's in check? Wait, I don't know, actually.
Yeah, so if you take with the bishop or if you take with the knight, white's response is going to be the same. White has to recapture whatever piece it is that you capture on f3 with.
Uh-huh.
And what is the why is this good for black, just logically speaking? Can you explain that to me? What have you achieved as a result of this trade?
I have opened his file on the king, and he has stacked pawns.
Yes, he has very weak pawns all over the king. And weak pawns like these are very, very important when they're located next to the king, because that presents to you a very clear pathway toward checkmating the king. Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of whether you would take with the bishop or with the knight, the reason I like taking with the knight is because after g takes f3, what is this pawn? What is this, once again? What is this called?
Pinned.
Yes, the pawn is pinned, which means the pawn cannot move, which means the pawn cannot help this queen on d1, his queen, get involved in the defense. Last thing in this position. I want you to involve your queen in the attack. I want you to bring it to the square that I'm about to highlight in blue. Okay. How do you get your queen there in the fastest possible way?
I move my other knight, my f knight.
Where would you move it? In order for it to be least disruptive? Yep. Very good. Oh, okay.
Oh, I was highlighting.
Among the squares you've highlighted was the correct square. So.
This is how I see, unfortunately.
No, this is all good.
I would... this is the only safe one. So
excellent. Yep, knight d7, and then you bring the queen out to h4. Now, does it make sense to you intuitively that the queen is oftentimes the strongest attacker because it is the strongest piece? And once you bring the queen to h4, you want to just fuck him up here. Queen takes h3, bishop takes f3. We'll talk about the nitty-gritty later. But for now, that's enough in this line.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So it seems to me that you're comfortable developing your pieces to active squares. You just need to be confident in doing so.
Yeah.
And you need to react dynamically to what white does. So for example, let's say that in this position, the bastard that playing white goes h3. Now, tell me where you would want to develop this bishop on c8. And here comes my head. I need to change my headset now. So that moment has arrived. Give me 1 second. All right. This is a complex procedure where I... All right. 1 moment. Here we go. All right. I think I can hear you now. Wait, no. Yes, I can hear you. Yeah, perfect.
Deeply at this.
This bishop on c8, where do you put it?
I could only go to e6 safely, kind of.
E6 offers a what? What can white do in the event of that?
Potential trade.
Bingo. Now, probably Levy has taught you this, but every time there's a potential trade, there's two things there's a checklist that you need to go through. Item number one is the piece that I'm offering more valuable than the piece my opponent is going to be offering, and that would constitute a blunder. Okay, so if you put a rook on e6, the bishop is more valuable than the rook. Unless you're sacrificing that piece deliberately, which is possible, that is not advisable. So the piece that you're offering should be of the same value that the piece your opponent is offering, right? That is an obvious point, but just making sure that we're on board with that. Number two is you need to make sure that the trade gives you something specific. You make specific gains in the position. Okay? So I can give you an example of a good trade, or I can give you an example of a bad trade. Does the trade give you new stuff for your pieces? And we'll put that into context in just a second, okay? And this has to happen basically every time that a potential trade is on the cards. You have to quickly run through these two items.
Okay.
Now, in this case, as a result of the trade, could you tell me what black gains and if black has any new defects in the position? Good stuff and bad stuff that happens.
Bad stuff is I have stacked pawns.
Excellent. That's the only bad thing, but that's not a very bad thing. Stacked pawns are not great, but they're not horrible.
Okay.
How about the good stuff?
Good thing I have even more control of the center.
Excellent. You have this pawn controls this square. Very good.
And if I castle on that side, I won't get back range as
Mr. Llama.
easily?
If you castle, you will not get back ring that easily. That is something I didn't even notice, but that is absolutely true. And there's one other thing that is true about you castling. What now do you have for this rook?
Oh, a free file, column.
Yeah,
thing.
Exactly. This is a file, by the way, and this is a rank. These are ranks.
Rank.
Yep, exactly. But row, I'll understand.
Yeah, row and okay.
So this is the F file, and this is the 8th rank.
Yes.
So this is what?
B file.
Very good. This?
4 rank.
Yeah, 4th rank. That's exactly right.
Rank.
So you get essentially the F file for your rook. And you could imagine a scenario where the rook basically fucks him up on one of these squares. I'm not saying this is going to happen on this move, but this is exactly what the essence of chess is. You want your pieces to be as active as possible, and what it means to be active is to be controlling squares and to be poised in a position where you can essentially mess your opponent up should the opportunity present itself, okay?
Okay.
So that's a rundown of this line, and I'm glad that you were able to see bishop e6. You don't want to stubbornly put your bishop here regardless of what they do. We'll get back to this in a moment, but let's talk about the scenario where they take your knight on e5, where they take your pawn on e5. Here's the slightly mind-boggling thing. Can you remind me why this move is bad?
Oh God, I already forgot.
That's okay.
Why is this bad?
And remember, discover check. You try to remember the final position of this line with that knight sitting on c6 and winning black's queen, and I guarantee you'll remember the first move that sets this thing up for white.
I thought the queen was involved. Why am I missing the queen?
Involve it. Involve white's queen. You're now playing white, by the way. So.
Oh, okay. Let me flip the board. That's probably why.
Yep. You'll see it
involve
immediately.
My queen. Oh yeah, I just bring my right.
Exactly. And if I move my knight away,
then I get to do my cool thing.
Excellent. And now you saw knight c6 and you win the queen.
Yeah.
Now one more thing before I stop bothering you about this position. Let's say that as black, I say, wait, I'm not moving my knight from e4. I'm going to defend that knight with the move d5. You're still playing white. Try to follow this up.
Okay, I'm still playing white. Try to follow this up.
Yes, guys, I do cuss occasionally when I do these call-app streams. It's also 2 a.m., so I hope no 7-year-olds are watching the stream.
But
sorry about that, guys. That's just how I do. And what would be the idea?
To put pressure on his knight?
To attack the knight. So putting pressure is to sort of bother something, but d3 literally threatens the knight. Now, between these two moves, which one is less weakening in terms of your own king?
D, because I'm going to castle on the other side.
Yes, and also because the move f3 creates a weakness along this diagonal. Black can give you this very nasty check, potentially.
Okay.
Okay? So the move f3 in general, there's a running joke among chess players, which by definition means it's not funny at all. But the joke says never play f3. There are some funny chess jokes, but they're like buried under like a cloud of rubble. So never play f3. And the reason this is said is because this weakens very significantly the king side. Yeah, d3.
Okay.
And if the knight moves, then can you still do what you did previously?
Sorry, I'm writing that down. I'm writing down never play f3. Yes, I can. I can do that.
You absolutely can. The fact that black has played this doesn't really change anything about this move. Black now has an additional escape square for the king, but it doesn't actually matter because you just take the queen. Great. So now that you're on board with why black can't take, let's take a look at the correct move. You can flip the board back to face black. Okay. The move is knight to c6. You develop the other knight. Now, what do you feel like is white's most tempting move? Like, what seems to be the obvious move that white has in this position?
The tempting move from white...
Yes, and this is the move 99.9% of people are going to play against you.
Is that bishop?
No.
You
can actually make the move if you'd like.
No, that's it. Yeah. Because they love looking at that f7 square.
Okay, well, that would be a blunder due to what response? This move knight c6 impacts the knight on e5. It threatens it. It offers a trade.
Oh, yeah.
Which means that if they do not respond to the trade, what are you going to do?
I take it.
Yeah, you just take the knight, and that's an extra piece. That is literally just an extra piece for black.
Oh.
So, but does that make sense?
I missed that.
Well,
no.
it's an unfamiliar position. You're just not used to things being hanging this early, so that's totally understandable.
Okay, so he came here thinking I would trade, but instead I went here.
Yes.
He would notice that.
And do what about it?
Okay, he would...
Beginners are offered a trade, they usually accept it. That's just rule of chess, basically.
Yeah, so now... I think he would just... Oh.
Well, they would trade, I think. What does that mean? What move?
You're saying they would go
take
here.
Your knight. They would take your knight. Now, I want you to tell me... I'm not even going to tell you the move. I want you to find it based on principles. You have 2 recaptures. You can take with this pawn, or you can take with this pawn. Based on opening principles, which pawn would you take with?
B! Final answer!
Why?
Wait, did you say
I did.
What?
Why B? What was the logic behind this?
Because I'm castling on the other side.
Okay, but wait a second. If you take with the
towards the center.
So capture toward the center is a rule. Okay, but that's not something that should really influence your decision that much. Instead, could you tell me what the main advantage of the move DC is in terms of development?
Well, now my queen has an open file.
A and B. What else has an open diagonal?
Oh, my bishop.
Your bishop. Your bishop on C8 now has an open diagonal. That doesn't mean, when I say this, that doesn't mean that you are going to move this bishop on the next move. It just means you have the capacity to do that soon. And the idea behind almost any gambit is that you get a lead in what?
Pieces.
Which translates to development, right? But basically, you're right. I mean,
development.
Fundamentally, you're right. You get a lead in pieces being active. And that's exactly what you put an emphasis on here. And the reason that white loses games really fast here is because when you start developing your pieces, you start creating threats. And when you start creating threats, if white doesn't develop in exactly the right way, then he's going to get absolutely blasted here. So what do you think white is going to do here? What do you think white is going to do here?
I think white is going to... I think naturally they would bring out their bishop.
They would bring out their bishop, and where would they put it?
Now they would go C4.
Okay, so let's start by looking at this move. If you are down to put some time into this position, you will know this position better than anybody within 600 points of you, and this will bring you some wins. So, and by the way, I know it's late, so at any point, if you want to pause, I don't want to take up.
No, you're totally fine.
Your time. I appreciate this.
I'm a night bird. Yeah.
Okay, good. And okay, so if bishop c4, now you actually can take the pawn on e4.
What?
Now, obviously, you should be surprised here. Like, you should be surprised because queen e2 creates what against the knight? Remind me what this is.
Oh, a discovered check? A pin?
A pin. This is a pin, and it's called, I think, an absolute pin by some people because the knight literally cannot move. It is illegal for the knight to move. And it appears that the knight may be lost. But how can you save the knight and get rid of the pin at the same time?
Save the knight and get rid of the pin at the same time. Just by moving my queen up to e7.
Excellent. You bring your queen up to e7. Nicely done. And if white now attacks your knight with d3, can you move the knight?
Yes.
Yes, you can move it to d6 in order to put pressure on the bishop. And what is possible now? What are you offering here?
A trade with the queen.
A trade of queens. And that trade of queens, what will you take on e7 with? The bishop or the king?
The bishop.
The bishop, in order to continue your development. This is an endgame. Black is doing very well here. Notice that you have won back the pawn you've sacrificed. At some point, we will take a look at this. This is not particularly likely. I think that most people that you face are actually not going to give up this pawn, in my opinion. I think, and we will see. I mean, if you are down to play this, then at some point we are going to see what people actually do here.
Okay, yeah.
And my guess is that people are going to try to defend this pawn in one of 3 ways. Could you give me one way to defend the pawn on e4 and develop a piece at the same time?
Pulling out their pawns on d2 or f2?
Yes, so they can play the move d3. They can play the move f3, although, as we discussed, that is not very advisable because it weakens the king very severely.
Right.
But how can they develop a piece and simultaneously defend the pawn?
The queen.
But developing the queen is not usually an essential goal of the opening.
The knight.
And where would you put it?
On c3.
Very good. So knight c3 is the move that I believe is most common among beginners because they are taught to develop their pieces and they simultaneously defend the pawn.
Yes.
Now the great thing about, and this is called the Stafford Gambit, the great thing about the Stafford Gambit is that your play is extremely natural. You make moves that you should be able to come up with yourself, even if you forget what I taught you. Okay. And this starts with the bishop on f8. Find me the most active square for that bishop. What is the most active square?
For that bishop, most is d6.
Why?
Because it's in the middle.
It's in the middle, but the middle is very wide. The middle is here, even here. You should be less... Okay, so here's what I want you to... Think less about a piece being literally in the middle and about what a piece is doing. You want a piece to be specific. I want to point to a piece and you say, this is what that piece is doing. So the knight on f6, what is it doing?
It is threatening this pawn.
Putting pressure on the pawn. And it's obviously controlling squares. I mean, controlling squares is already a job for a piece. So don't take this like too far. But if you put the bishop on d6, it's not... This pawn on h2, does this pawn seem significant to you? Where is white's king?
No.
White's king is still
all the way over here.
So can you put the bishop on a square so that it aims at a pawn near white's king?
Yeah, so then it's c5.
Excellent. Now, if white's king were to be castled, then and only then would it be more sensible to develop the bishop to d6? Because what would be the difference?
The king would be on g1, so then if I took that pawn, I'd be looking at it. Yeah. Exactly.
So potentially you would be pressuring a pawn that is nearby the king. Pawns in and of themselves are not that significant. It's the pawns that are near the king which give you that avenue that you can use to approach the king. So bishop c5 is the move. Okay.
Okay.
So bishop c5 is the move, and let's say that white continues to play kind of nonchalantly, and I can show you how quickly white can get a lost position. If white plays the move d3, white is already lost. And notice this pawn. Can you find another way to attack this pawn with another piece? That's your goal in this position.
Well...
Great. Yep.
But then his queen.
But look at the whole board. Is that knight going to be protected? That's why you played d takes c6. Yep, exactly. The bishop's gonna protect the knight. So can you make that move on the board?
Yes.
Excellent. Now you see that you're threatening to take on f2. What are you threatening to take with? The knight or the bishop? Let's say that white goes h3. You can take either with the bishop with check or with the knight. Which one would you take with?
Take with the bishop.
Why?
Oh, God, no. I take with the knight because then I get a fork.
You get a fork on the king, queen, and the rook. Good recognition of forks. The only reason that you would take with the bishop would be if this were like checkmate. And this is very clearly not checkmate. In fact, this leads to a very problematic situation. I'm going to give you another trick question. Is white threatening to take the knight in this position? Let's say you make the wrong move. Do you need to move the knight?
No, because then my bishop will put him in check again.
And why is that bad for white? Like, let's say that, I don't know, you play a random move, and then white takes the knight. In your head, if you take with the bishop, and white takes this bishop on f2, isn't white winning 2 pieces?
No, because I get his queen.
Excellent. After. That's what I wanted you to see. What I want you to notice here is that the king and the queen are on the same diagonal. And what you're going to have to do as you start getting better is making these observations. When you see a position in which, the king and the queen are on the same diagonal. So what kind of a tactic does that sort of give rise to in certain positions?
Okay. That's
a question.
Oh. I was writing it down.
No worries.
Yes, okay.
When you've got like a situation like this, king and the queen on the same diagonal, there's two related tactics that are kind of the reverses of each other.
It's not remove the defender.
No, that's a different area, different ballpark.
Different.
So what is this called? If you play bishop takes g4 check, what is the name of this?
That's called check.
That is called check, but the specific tactical pattern is called a skewer. Have you heard of a skewer?
Oh yes, a skewer. Mm-hmm.
This is a skewer. Now, if you flip the position of the king and the queen, what would that be called?
That would be called
It is the opposite of a skewer, when the pieces are flipped. And you know this.
That is called an oh shit.
That is called also an oh shit for the opponent who utters that word, phrase.
That's a pin.
That is a pin. So, in your mind, whenever a king and the queen are on the same diagonal, or a king and the rook are on the same diagonal, you want to start looking for pins and skewers against those pieces. That is how you start seeing tactics. If you don't notice these things, then you're not going to be looking for the shit that's going to win you pieces and win you the game, right?
Okay.
But here you did notice, and well done, you noticed the fork. Queen moves, and you play what?
I play knight h1.
And you are up a rook. You are winning a rook. You're going to have to evacuate this knight, which is not going to be easy, but you are going to do that with the help of attacking white's king. So let's say that I play the move g2 to g4. What is the purpose of this move? What is white threatening?
To take the knight with his queen.
To take the knight with his queen. Now, you, I'm sure, not because like you're bad, but because that's just how, one thinks about chess before they get experienced. You're probably inclined to move the knight, right? That's what you're thinking about doing. But that is not the only way to save the knight. Look at white's king for a second. Can you attack that king while involving another one of your pieces into the attack?
Yes, I could bring my bishop up to f2.
Okay, and that's the right idea, but there is a way to do the exact same thing along that very diagonal, but to bring another piece into the attack. The bishop is already participating. Instead, think about your other pieces. Which of them could come into the attack?
Oh, my queen could go h4.
Excellent. Queen h4 check. That king on e1, and you should already see this intuitively, is in trouble. Now, in theory, would you want to trade queens here if you're black? Did you learn the sort of one of the key rules of converting a material advantage?
I learned that, I don't know how true this is, but I learned that you should always trade your queen when you're black. So
that it's not that you should always trade your queen with your black. When you are up material, so I would say when you have an extra rook or more, then trading pieces is generally a good idea, also known as simplifying the position. Okay. The more you trade, like imagine if you have an extra rook, and there's X number of pieces on the board. If you trade all of those pieces, you're just going to have a rook against the king. And are you comfortable delivering basic checkmates?
Yes.
So you're basically trying to, and that should make sense to you, you're trying to reach that basic checkmate by trading as many pieces as possible.